bring back the Twangy licks? Well, I definitely would. I'd love to do that, but possibly in a little bit different form, maybe. Uh, because what I've found that whenever I do just short, tiny videos, they kind of get lost. They don't get suggested at all, and I actually started with Twangy licks, and I thought that these were actually one of the uh, most useful stuff because I did the explanation. These were the licks that were pulled out of my actual playing, something that I used like every week on every gig. Maybe not the exact licks, but the concept of certain tones that I could get with guitar. Uh, so, well, unfortunately, that's how it works. Stuff that I liked the most, and I thought that it was maybe most unique, doesn't doesn't get any interest. Like I did the video on the harmonics, which I think is one of the coolest sound that you can make with a guitar, and nobody really cared about these, and in my book, this is something that makes that adds extra range to the guitar that you usually don't think that there is, and some intervallic combinations that are really hard to play on a guitar that are almost piano like. So, for example, stuff that consists of very small intervals, like seconds, right? So on a guitar, say between D and E, this is pretty much what we can do. I mean, we can incorporate these into chords, but having a run of couple consecutive notes of a scale requires to reach for the open strings and some really weird fingerings. Say to keep things ringing over. Uh, but then with artificial harmonics, you can actually reach for the notes that are above the chord. So, for example, we have C and we have D that is an octave below, but we can split them. So C, D, E, sounding at the same time, and I'm not limited to the use of open strings, so I can also do this in any other key, right? So C sharp, D sharp, right? C sharp, D sharp, F sharp. So even with simple bar chords, when we have minor pentatonic, just like that. So right. So on bass strings, I play an octave harmonic. Then it's a third string, fifth string, second string, fourth string, and a first again. So this is like quite unusual sound for a guitar, and something that I really like to throw here and there, of course, under the right circumstances, because that's another problem with a clean guitar, that it's really hard to keep it clean in a messy environment of the band. So when there is a busy arrangement and you just want to play a single note, it'll either sound buried or very or very thin. Mm, yep. Yeah. Anything that Tommy Emmanuel uh, brings up is absolute masterpiece, and I think he Uh, he has reached like the best balance between art and amazing, incredible ability to communicate. I mean, his playing is so approachable and at the same time masterful. So this is possibly like the best of both worlds. That there is sophistication of pushing the boundary, but at the same time it's around the tunes that resonate with a broad audience, and this is well, something very unique, uh, because there are plenty of fantastic players that had chops or tried to reinvent certain aspects of music all the time, but struggle to get popularity. They kind of built certain, certain wall around their playing, about their artistry, and well, possibly the best example I can think of was great Lenny Bro. Lenny Bro was well, in my view, one of the greatest guitar players that ever lived. But he was going through very, very hard times, both in terms of well, his personal life, which was what it was, uh, but in terms of playing, he was the holistic, total musician. Whenever he reached for any style, it was turned up to 11. So when it was flamenco, it was true to style, it was well researched and everything. Um, as far as I remember, I think he was like 14 or 15 when he recorded an album with Chad Atkins arrangements back in the 50s. And it's pretty much spot on. It's dead on. It's incredible. You know how close it was to Chad's versions, but then he just started doing his own thing, and it was everything there really. Playing with jazz greats of the day back in '70s, uh, and it's possibly the only problem is that yeah, oh absolutely, Chet Chet is a benchmark. No Gretsch. It's a little bit. The thing is, I still have Gretsch. Gretsch is in the other room, hanging on the wall. Uh, Most of the gigs that I do right now are pub gigs with no proper bandstands. I just prefer not to carry around quite expensive guitar that might get damaged. Luckily, uh, I got it in 2014, and there is not a single scratch on it. So I'm lucky enough that I kept it in almost store-like condition. It still has the chocolate vanilla smell of the case. Um, so I want to keep it as long as possible. And usually I carry around Gretsch when there is like a high-profile gig or like a hodl hodl jazz gig or something. Then it's Gretsch all the way. And if it's if not Gretsch, it's either this classic vibe custom Telecaster. It's been upgraded with some clever pickups. I had hard time identifying what these are. The thing about keeping the Gretsch in the case, uh, it is finished with the lacquer. So the thing is that it still gases after all these years, and you can tell that it takes years for it to cure to harden. So if you keep it in case locked, it tends to gas out into the case and cause corrosion. I'm not entirely sure if it's still the deal nowadays, but it was one of the serious reasons of certain certain damage that happened to old guitars. It was mainly because of the adhesive that was used for the binding. So we had binding rot, but also keeping it in case kind of slows down the curing of the lacquer, and so it's secure in a controlled humidity environment. Oh, after all, it's just a guitar. It's a guitar. It's meant to be played. I'm just not lucky enough to get right gigs as I used to, so it's more of a local stuff. Uh, yes, I'm quite slow to come up with anything new. I had a very, very serious block of coming up with anything useful because honestly, I wanted to touch on some. Uh, okay, whenever I want to communicate some kind of idea, uh, I check whether it's something that's been done before, and if there is anything that I could maybe add to it. And there are so many great guys that do that, that I don't really think my video would just add to the noise. I don't think that there is anything special about the way that I could possibly teach it and show it. But there are certain things that I think that are important for guitar players, for musicians in general, that I could possibly make a video on. And it takes a lot of preparation because the thing is that whenever I do any tutorials, these are one takes. I usually cut out some stuff, and maybe they're like retakes of the whole sections, but this is unscripted, obviously. Uh, and I just sit through like I would sit with a student that I've never met, and to try to explain certain things. Uh, but I think that something that I would love to touch and do like a video was how how to learn tunes, how to find things for you, how to incorporate new things into your skill set, and that's basically by rediscovering things in a very, very, very obvious manner by listening and trying to transcribe, but with certain technical aspects. Because usually when we listen to the tune, things might happen too quickly for us to analyze, right? So that's why the tutorial, when someone shows us, okay, yeah, well, so this is where you press, this is where you strum, this is the chord shape, right? So it gives you like a ready solution. So now you know the song, uh, and if you know the song, uh, you have certain, or you already have certain common elements for other tunes that you'd love to learn, right? But at the same time, when you have a ready solution, like this is the chord that we use in there, you're ending up relying on someone providing you with the solution. When I learned to play guitar in late 80s, early 90s. So what basically we had, uh, we uh, we had tape players, we had vinyl players, and some of us still had working reel-to-reels. And reel-to-reel player was the most powerful tool that we could use to learn music. I think that early in the 90s, I actually borrowed an old Valve Czechoslovakian machine because I could put it on the half speed. So I copied my new CDs onto a 40-year-old reel-to-reel quarter-inch tape. I slowed it down, and that was how I worked out what was there. Uh, and possibly this is maybe not the most time efficient method, of learning the tune, but it's most musically rewarding because uh, usually I was not a I wasn't really a patient child, so I didn't really focus on learning actual tunes. I wanted to learn to play guitar because I wanted to do my things or improve my playing around the stuff that I've been playing with bands. So it was never really about covering the tune. And it's still pretty much not that way. I mean, whenever I look into a tune with more detail, it's about getting the principles and and just stretching them to wherever I find something useful out of new techniques. So what what is the positive thing about learning without looking, without being basically clueless what the actual player did? And I have a funny story about that. I think it was like around '96 that I got the Steve Vai CD with a tune called "All About Eve," and there was an opening chord in there. And this opening chord sounds well, but it's in tune. Just a second. Yep, back in the ballpark. Okay, so that was the chord. That was the first opening chord of the tune, and maybe I'll change the camera angle just to show it maybe uh, what's going on in there because this one was it was fun. Uh, okay. Ooh. Yep, I'll just need to remove the mount because just before streaming device. Okay. So I'll put you guys on the stand. Oh, where is my cat? Unfortunately, cat left me. She possibly was found by someone from the neighborhood because she was the cat that liked to go out, and we didn't manage to find her. I was heartbroken, unfortunately. So the thing is that she had kittens, and the kittens are all with our friends. We managed to rehome them throughout our friends, so I still can visit them, But going back to the clueless transcription stories. So the thing was that I was just intrigued by the sound of the first chord of the Steve Vai tune, right? And I put it on my quarter-inch reel-to-reel, slowed it down just to work every note, and what I could hear were these notes ringing over each other. So, and I thought, okay, this is Steve Vai, this guy. Well, he's a guitar god. He does impossible technical stuff. So I'm certain that his hands were so huge that he could stretch that chord. And I tried to imagine how it would be to play it because I wasn't able to play them. So this is D on the second string of a third fret, fifth fret with middle finger, and then there are two frets of gup, and it's F and B flat, So it's eighth fret of A and D, and it's all ringing. Yes, exactly. This is a difficult chord. It's a the only bigger stretch that you can get is when you move it down and down. So this is the stretchiest version from the first position. And the insane thing about this chord is that I have to hold my fingers sideways to have these notes ringing. Uh, so I decided to practice this chord. Well, I thought it was just to learn the sound. I started possibly somewhere higher up the neck, work my way down and down and down, just to make it work. And over time, I managed to play it. I basically did some stretching exercises to be able to reach further. I managed to get an extra finger almost, so my left hand, my fretting hand is way more stretched than my other hand. So it's almost like a finger and a half, which is it's okay. It doesn't hurt. I didn't hurt myself in the process, luckily. But yep, I'll touch on the difficult chords in a second. But after the years, I've seen. I think it was quite recently. I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. I've seen some videos of Steve Vai playing these tunes, this exactly tune live, and it turned out that he just used alternate open tuning, and it was something that you could play with two fingers in the first position. I had no idea about that. I assumed that he's a great player, he can do that. So if he can do that, he's a human, I can do that too. And I found this chord. I mean, it's mine now, right? I managed to find this kind of voicings and this kind of fingerings, and it's just gonna stay. It's something that I discovered by not knowing, right? So it's exactly the same with doing Chet Atkins stuff. I mean, the only thing that I had at my disposal were recordings and the TV videos from the 50s and 60s. So it was a little bit hard to tell technically what's going on. After so many years, I discovered somewhere in the archives the articles that he wrote and published for guitar magazines, which are pure gold. I mean, they're still online. There are plenty of PDFs. They're worth having a look, because it's usually a tune or a section of a tune with some techniques, and before that there is a discussion how he coped with it, how he discovered that. So it was like the best of both worlds. You have the recipe how to play, you have a tab of a tune, and you have a commentary of the guy who basically invented this stuff or refined and redefined guitar playing. So that was incredible. It was like a gold mine to me. I just read it through and checked what was there, and with difficult chords. The thing is that like a primary difficulty that I can think of is whenever you want to keep the notes ringing, because it means that there'll be always something under there. You'll have to keep your fingers around it. You'll possibly need to focus on a very light touch. I have fat fingers really. I have big hands and fat fingers, and I tend to run into strings all the time. I mean, it's something that I need to pay attention to. Also, uh, I would suggest that when something isn't working the first time, uh, it's just about moving it to a more comfortable place, because well, we have four fingers, six strings. It was invented by humans, played by humans. If there's something that sounds like's out there, usually it's some kind of alternative technique or a weird tuning most of the time. uh, but even with the stretchiest chords, say, well, this Mr. Sandman, major 7 to major 6, right? Uh, I like to play it this way because I like to see logic in the chords, because I started playing guitar after playing some piano, and I tried to incorporate the ideas of, like, okay, I know my C major, my F major chord on the piano on the white keys, and where these are on the guitar. Uh, so I didn't have any guitar books, nothing, no one around really to show me how to do it properly. So I started with triads, with the most basic stuff, like, okay, so I need C, E, and G. Uh, okay, I got my E in here. This is B. Well, okay, C is here. G. Okay, that's triad. That'll do. I didn't care about strumming through all the strings. It was like, if once I had this, I was really happy. Though. I mean, this is my C major. Whoa, just one finger. Cool. This is my G, right? So it's been like that for a while, and again, whenever I turned into something more advanced, and it was most of the time it was by ear. I mean, I knew how to do like a proper notation, but guitar is one of the hardest instruments to read, because contrary to the piano, when you see note like G on the stuff, you know that it's just one single key in there on the keyboard of 88 keys that produces this actual pitch of the guitar. The problem is that we have same G in numerous places, right? So, or basically every on every string, every note repeats after 5 or 4 frets, right? So this is a challenge to have a comfortable place to read while focusing on rhythm and pitch. Uh, okay, minibar, like A in 5th position. Okay, so is it about first two strings, or is it like I'm still out of tune a little bit. Uh, with bar, uh, whenever there is like an embedded bar, it's just, well, I bend my fingertip the other way, just it's just backwards, bend backwards, so I can keep other fingers on top. Sometimes, sometimes I just use side of my index finger. So there's again, this is more of a byproduct of limitations that I had with my hands not really fitting the frets. So, for example, with this D chord, that is usually this is how it's being shown. I just can't make this thing sound right. I mean, my fingers don't fit on the fret. I just use flat bar with a with whichever finger I need at that point. So, but uh, so we'll make the string A play. Okay, whenever I have if I have any kind of chord that I can play, oh, E, okay. If there is a way of not using a fretted string, for example, in E or A chord. Okay, say if we have a bar like that, we have E and A, right? On the bottom, I would usually just skip these bottom notes because I have my open A fifth string, and I would just finger what's above that. Okay, what kind of practice I would suggest for the bars? Progressive bars on 2 strings, 3 strings, 4 strings, and just allow every string to ring, and the important thing is that each of these grips should be released. So I want to have it in like one consistent move, one consistent grip. So these are my 2 strings from the lower sounding. So fifth fret, B and E. Then 3 strings, then 4, release. And there's one more thing, at least that's how I do that, because when it's closer to the edge, it's easier to treat those fretted notes as they're just fingered notes with the tip of the finger. But when there are 3, 4, or 5 strings at once, I tend to press them down with the edge of my index finger. I find it just easier. I don't have to put this much force, so they all sound okay. And this is like it's not the flat edge. It's like here, 3/4. Ha. So basically, if this is my index finger flat, this is roughly the angle that I press strings when I bar. So this is like more about finding the spot, might not work for you. Everyone has a little bit different hands, but this is like the flat-ish spot of your index finger that you can use. So it's just more about finding which edge of the finger is the most convenient to play it. Also, there are ways to avoid bars, really. Uh, for example, Merle Travis, he actually never barred any chord. It was either thumb up or voicings that used open strings. At first, Chet, during his electric early era, also tended to play a lot with thumb over and just it was his way of reaching notes behind that would land behind the bar. Then when he moved to nylon string and acoustic, he started preferring guitars with broader necks, and he started to play more of a bar chords. But again, I would suggest that this is something that will just it'll just click. I mean, like most of the things that are technical. Unfortunately, with technical stuff, it's based on our experience and on certain ideas that we just came up along the way, right? So it's a very individual thing. I can suggest certain things, knowing where the one person is coming from, and possibly like having a look, how does it look to you, and where can you take it? So maybe. Okay, how do I make double stops? Basically, I make double stops by following the chord tones, and technically, it, if I play with thumb pick and fingers, I play individual strings. So say. Two fingers to strings. When I do hybrid picking, it's the same thing. I'm not a fan of strumming. I don't really like to strum chords unless this is like an element of the style, or it's something that the song is associated with. But I prefer. Okay, talking about Blue Days, Black Knight's gonna make the hammer on a chord in 5th position. Okay. All right. So the thing is, we'll come back to double stops in a second. This particular moment, that when there are hammer-ons on a chord of Blue Days Black Nights, I would just suggest bar on 3 strings, and you can think of it just like a normal hammer-on between 5th and 6th fret, and just laying down the index finger flat. It might help. Played it for like a year or so, but yeah, well, this is more like let's Okay, theory behind the double stops. Okay. Uh, the, the thing is that it all depends on the context, but most of the time, what we will do, we'll just play two melodies that follow the tonality of the tune. So let's say we're in the key of C major, and if I want to do double stops in the interval of third, my I have two voices now, two voices that are uh, running parallel next to each other in the same distance, but the distance is being shifted by the construction of the scale. And what I mean by that, if I want to keep this interval, oh, no worries. If I want to keep this interval and go up, I'll have to follow major scale with both voices. And how I would do that? Let's say we're going from C to G. This is my lower voice. It starts C, D, E, F, G. Right? Do, ba, do, do, do. We have a major scale. It's obvious sound that we are all accustomed to. And my upper voice is following the same scale, but it starts on E, so it's da, da, do, do, do. It's still C major scale, but we're starting at the third of the scale. And now I want to have them sounding together. Okay, and what's going on in there? Basically, I'll bring my whiteboard and I explain. Whew, things are getting interesting. Cool. Okay, so I got the whiteboard. It's gonna be a little bit easier. Some Matt Cordell stuff in there. Okay, so let's have a look at the major scale, right? We have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. I hope it's, yep, C, D, F, G, A, B, C. Okay, major scale is built that way that we between third and fourth note we have a half step, and 7, 8 note we also have half step, right? These are half steps. Cool. And now what I'll do is I'll have another major scale on top of that. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. So what I did here is I just shifted it 2 notes to the left. So we have right now our double stops, C, E, D, F, and so on. But because we want to keep the construction of the scale the same, right? So between E and F and B and C, we'll still have our half tones. And this is where the thing gets complicated, because I can't really use one single shape on a guitar to play double stops that sound anything like anything useful. I can do interesting stuff that sounds like diminished or augmented scale, or a whole tone, or some weird kind of tonality, but not like not something that sounds harmonic and conventional, right? Okay, so let's have a look at a way to memorize both shapes and idea how to play those double stops, because we have basically minor and major thirds alternating in a certain pattern, but now it's some some hardcore theory, but it's useful for other stuff too. So I hope I won't lose these guys. But in major key, we have three major chords. In key of C major, it's C major, F major, and the G major. Three major triads, right? C, F, and the G, right? If we spell chords and or triads along the major scale, they go like this: C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, and C major. Which shows us one thing: we have only three major shapes in the whole scale. So if I play my double stops, this is my major third, so it's just a bar on second and third string, or here it's going to be one fret away, right? So it's 10th and 9th. But let's say this is the place that I like to start with. This visually, it's my middle of the neck, right? So when I drop my eyesight, that's the place that I see, right? I know that this is actual middle of the string, but this is a good place. It's comfortable. I like 5th fret in general. So let's have a look at the shapes. How do they change? This is my major shape. This is my minor shape. So 5/5 is my major, 5/4 is my minor, and I'll follow the structure of the major scale, and we'll alternate major and minor thirds to make it sound like two major scales in harmony. So we have major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, minor, major. So the easiest way to memorize that is only three major thirds on the fifth, on the first step, fourth, and fifth. Everything else is minor, and that's it. Now I'll follow my major scale, but on the G string: C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And on these notes, I'll build my major and minor thirds, remembering that only on first, fourth, and fifth step is gonna be major, everything else is minor. So, okay, first step, major, from D, minor, from E, minor. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 now, major. Fifth, major. 6, minor. 7's minor. And 8, major. And basically with double stops, usually when we go for familiar sound, that's the theory. We just follow, we follow the tonality that works at that specific moment. And it's not only for double stops, it's also for the chords. Where if you want to play chord melody, say in C major, so this is my C major triad, D major, E minor, F, G, and so on. So if I have my melody on top, I can harmonize it with the chord underneath just by following the scale. If I have my double stops but in the interval of 6, 6 is inversion of thirds, so we'll have a kind of the same function, the same character of the sound, different color, but basically it will serve the same purpose. So instead of a major third, we have minor 6. and it's gonna be the same thing. I'll just follow my major scales. Uh, and this is where it comes to certain useful tools that are very good to have. And I wanted to make videos for such a long time about this stuff, but it would be out of context, or I'd have to talk for hours about, jumping from one topic to the other. But pretty much one of the most neglected skill is to know all 12 major scales in every position. It sounds like, oh my god, there's so many shapes numbers. No, it's not. It's not like that. What you really need to know is how they are related to each other, every note on every string. Because playing along the neck is something that by default we don't do too often when we think about that. I mean, it's like, we want to stay in the position. But when it comes to inverting chords and playing arrangements, that's where you just need to look way beyond what's in the current position. So it's as far as open strings, chords that you actually have, and everything that you can build on top of that. So that's, again, I like to play along the neck because you can see the intervals right away, like we had with our double stops. For example, let's have a look at the G major. So we'll do the same thing. We have our major third that comes from the factory, and so this is our first step. First step, major, minor, minor, fourth major, fifth major, sixth minor, seventh minor, and eighth again major. Now we spoke that to have something called major scale, we'll need those half steps between third, fourth, seventh, and eighth. Let's have a look at the string, at the guitar string in G major. If that doesn't hold true, okay? So we have G, whole step, whole step. This is my third step. Third, fourth, half step. Yep. Sounds right. Whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Okay, so between the last note and the next to last note is half step, and between third and fourth it's again half step, and between all the other steps there's a whole step, whole tone, right? So we can see that even with my fingering, right? So it's open string, whole step, half. So we have this kind of shape of the first half, whole, half, right? And again, whole, half. So if we go beyond that point, major scale just on a single string, right? So right now, if I know it on this string and I remember, okay, I was supposed to have my half steps between third and fourth, seven and eight. And if I remember how the octave shape looks like, oh, no problem at all. Sam, no worries. Whenever you have any questions, hit me. Okay. We just seen how we can put the major scale along just one single string, right? And because guitar is great when it comes to having the same thing but certain shape away. If I if I have my octave shape between first, okay, woohoo, how smooth. What is the best way to learn notes on the fretboard? My favorite topic. Because I know several ways and I incorporated all of them. Because I'd say learning the notes by playing is the most natural way. And what does it mean? Uh, we would start by looking at the obvious guidelines that we have that are built into the guitar. That's the first thing. So we have open strings, right? E, A, D, G, B, E. They are here. Now, let's try to think what is half step above that. So E, F, A sharp or B flat, D, D sharp or E flat, G, G sharp or A flat, B, C, E, F. First thing, we have two E strings. So that means that if we have one note on one on the other, it's going to be the same note on both of these. They are two octaves apart. We have two strings in price of one. Right now we have to remember that we will only learn location on 5 strings. Okay, now another thing. We have a shape of the octave. This is the most powerful thing because basically if we learn one string and one string only, we already have a very, very clear pointer to the notes on a string that is 1 down and 2 frets further. Say, when we learn our bar chords, this is like a, just let's use what we know to learn the notes on the fretboard. This is our F chord, right? This is, the first hard chord that we learn, and it would be a shame if we just use it in the first position. We can use it as a major chord in any position. So F, G, A, right? B flat, B, C, D. Okay. Root of the chord is on the 6th and on the 1st string. So, if we know where the F major chord is, we know where the note F is on the 1st and last string, right? Okay. As we know where the G is, okay, this is our G on the 3rd fret. On 5th fret, A. On 7th we got B, C, D, and so on. Now, we spoke about the shape of the octave, which is from our root note, say G here, we skip one string and then we skip one fret, okay? So this is my G. Right now, whenever I have a note on my 6th or on my 1st string, say my A on 5th fret, on 7th fret, one string lower, I have the same A, right? An octave higher, but it's still A. Okay, so right now in the same position, I already know my 3 A's. I have an open string that is called A. So automatically, just by learning this bar chord, this very, very basic bar chord, I already know where 1, 2, 3, 4 A's are on the guitar, right? So this is like a first thing is the octave shape from the place that we know. We basically try to have a look at the relationships that are very clear, which is an octave shape repeating on the same string, and there's another thing which is that when we tune guitar, well, we used to tune with the 5th fret, right? This one is not in tune. The notes are repeating every 5 frets. But again, was something that I didn't find that useful because it's a little bit hard to focus your vision and imagine that something It starts repeating after 5 frets, and we're already so high here in high positions. And what was there? Maybe not that useful. But let's have a look at one more thing. 12th fret. Everything starts repeating on 12th frets. So basically, what we have to memorize right now are first 12 frets and 5 strings. So it's not that much, especially that we know that what we know on our E string repeats 2 frets higher on the D string. Okay, so it starts to be quite clear. Then we have another shape of the octave from our D string that we had. It's a little bit different shape because we have break of 2 frets. Right? So right now we can practice this stretchy interval, say starting on F, this is F, this is F. Same note. We don't have to stretch our hands, we can just shift position or shift shape. This is my octave between lower strings. This is my octave shape between 2nd and 4th string. So suddenly, knowing my E string points at the same note on other 3 strings, right? So I know this is my F on the 6th string, on my 1st string. Here is the shape of an octave on 4th string. Here is the shape on the octave between 2nd and 2nd and 4th string, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4 Fs in the beginning of at the lower positions, right? So this is one more thing, and from having memorized this simple relationship, 2 octave shapes from 6th string, skip 1 string, 4th string, 1 fret in between, then from the 4th string to 2nd string, skip 1 string, 2 in between. Now, with these relationships between intervals and notes, we need to memorize very simple major scale shape on my favorite 5th fret, which is just that for now. But with speaking out loud where the pitches are. So it's C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, right? C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. From that point, we already see that between first and the last note of this little major run, we have an octave shape, right? And this is right, it's from C to C, C, G, A, B, C, right? Okay. Now, let's try to use our octave shape to point down from these notes below. So we already have this sorted. This is C and C. Now from the B here, we know that this is B and B, A and A, G and G, F and F, E and E, D and D, and C and C. So basically, right now we learned an upper octave of the major scale, and we learned how to see where is the same note an octave below. So we'll use this bigger shape for first and second string, and for 3rd and 4th string we'll use this smaller one with 1 fret, right? So this way, from what we know from simple shapes, we know how to name stuff. From this point, whenever we have, if we know one note, we figured out this is C. This is my C. This is a point that is when when I look at the guitar, this is what I possibly see the most. That's why you call it C. Now, half step below the C is B, right? And half step above the C is C sharp. So if we know one note, we know what's above it and what's below it. And the way I like to look at the fretboard was to where the white keys are, where it's C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and work from that. Whenever I think about any other key, I don't think in a shape of major, shape of major scale that I shift around. I think about how far is it from C major? What notes do I change from C major? And this is one more thing that I saved a lot of time because there are methods. It's being tossed all around internet how to learn scales and modes. The thing is that I don't really play music that uses modes that much anymore. But I had hard time memorizing the shapes because whenever I looked at the shapes, they were odd, they were weird, they had groupings of 3 notes. We usually in music when we build a melody we rarely group something in 3. I mean it's it's 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, right? Not weird, right? So it didn't make too much sense to me to have a look at the shape of the scale. So I decided to skip a little bit and just know all the major, all my major scales, all my keys on the fretboard, and know what the modes are, because basically they are, all the 7 modes of the major. So Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. They are just different starting points of the same major scale. So on a technical level, on a guitar level, it doesn't really matter if in your head it's that if I think of what I play as B Locrian, or is it C major that I start on the note below, right? Because these are the same notes. Of course, they give you different tonality in different context, but basically, yes, can I read music? Yes, I can read music. I went to music school for way too many years, but I played classical saxophone, so it doesn't really count. And I learned some composition. I had like a proper classical music theory. I had some of the jazz music theory, so I'm not that scared of it. And with reading on a guitar, it's a sketchy topic, really. I mean, guitar players basically don't read that well because we have hard time of settling on in which places do we want to read stuff that we play. But yes, I read music. I'm not that fluent anymore in that, but I read. I mean, this possibly if I came back to like cruise ship work or like comping in a like a proper environment, it would possibly take
maybe a couple of days to get right back on track. But if I have like a jazz head that I need to play in the jazz, but I can read that. Yes. Uh, okay, with learning theory, because this is the thing. Uh, it Okay, just because there are some people that can name certain things in music, and there are other people who make beautiful music but possibly don't use certain words to describe them, it doesn't mean that they don't know the theory. Because it's more about theory is to describe the inner workings of something that is already there. This is my approach. This is approach of many music theorists. This is approach of many musicians, of many great musicians that I've read. That theory is just a way of naming things that are there that we find to sound pleasing or doing things to us that trigger certain emotions, right? So that we have certain certain resolutions of certain chords. We have certain colors of certain chords. We have certain ways to alter dominance that makes us feel certain things. But it doesn't mean that we need to learn from the ground up. I was lucky enough to start on a piano, and I basically, through discovery, through trying to find certain similarities between certain things in music, I kind of came up, to look at certain things the way I do. Uh, but I wouldn't say that knowing theory will actually will that it's like that the lack of music theory is standing in the way. Okay, that's the thing. Rockabilly got me into jazz, not the other way around. I um this is certain things that I absolutely love about rockabilly, because uh, and western swing, that there is a way of playing. There's a room to play in a clever way in rockabilly. You can you can mix all the styles there are. You can play your western swing runs. You can play your bebop runs. You can play chords that are now being seen as a jazz chords, but that were just in popular music back then. So you can play things that sound like a horn section in an orchestra, or you can play blues phrase or a rock and roll phrase, and and this is a perfect melting pot to discover different styles. It's a rockabilly is best guarded gateway to all the other styles, and I think that's probably the most challenging thing is that because it contains everything. It was a cross section, crossroads of so many sophisticated styles, and they carried on. I mean, Scotty Moore is a fantastic example, right? So uh, there was this element of country music, and country music back in 40s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. It was swinging as hell when you think on the construction level, on the songwriting level, or on the improvisers level. It was pretty much the same as playing as playing swing in jazz bands. It evolved further apart with bebop era, when jazz started being a music that was more mostly for musicians. It was an art form, right? It was less of it wasn't a music that was meant to be enjoyed. uh, and when you think about that, in rockabilly, you can use you can use tonality that that is common to jazz and to swing music that was later kind of left behind. Uh, I mean, it was the punk rock of its era. It was a rebellious music for the young ones, right? Uh, but for some reason, in modern punk music, you don't hear these chords. You don't hear these chords, right? Uh, and what I mean by these is something that has an upper structure. Uh, it's not just just root and fifth or a major chord. It has six. It has ninth. It has 13ths on certain dominant chords, right? So there's more of a tonality in there. It's more intriguing. It's like having this whole extra dimension of harmony, and and Scotty Moore played that way. Sonny Curtis with Buddy Holly played that way. Of course, Cliff Gallup played that way. I mean, these are absolutely brilliant solos. These are so great solos. They're coming from a different, from a different brain, different musical brain than where the blues is coming from. I mean, there's a blues element in it, but it's unique. So there's again one more thing that I always found very hard about rockabilly. Well, because Piercarlo mentioned that it's difficult to gain speed. Yes, that is right, and the reason for that is that we are stuck with something that is pretty much clean tone or just on the verge of breakup. Sometimes we're playing with slightly overdriven tone, but we're playing with other musicians responsible for providing the pulse, right? So what it usually means that we're kind of hostages of our drummers and our bass players, because it's really hard to keep the clean tone clean in the band environment. When you listen to the recordings, oops, I'll have to plug my phone. Anyway, if you listen to the recordings, you can easily tell that if there is a clean guitar and you can easily tell what it's doing, everyone else is not doing much. Usually, for example, with Gene Vincent records, what you have, this is a rock and roll, swing rock and roll band, and almost all of the tunes are played with brushes. There are almost no sticks on Gene Vincent recordings. And the thing is that whenever there's a sophisticated solo, there's a room for it. Basically, it's the same thing with older Chet Atkins stuff. When you have a guitar as a focal point, and there's very little of anything in the arrangement doing anything. It's a guitar, and there is a long way nothing, and there's everything else. So basically, where the speed and technicalities and technical proficiency comes in the rockabilly music, it's about realizing that certain things work better in the band context than the others, because suddenly we are left with not much that might help us. Of course, the amplifier that is breaking up helps a lot, because we have a compression of the notes that are softer in the background, that they're going to be a little bit more audible. But what I would suggest is just working on a very particular on the very particular runs, like pool of lines. and these are specific lines to specific tunes. I like these open string rebounds. So it's because like speed in the solos is dependent on such a variety of factors. Some of it is are scalar runs, right? And there are so many techniques that we can perceive as something that is at high speed, that's like a fast run. So this may be like a arpeggio run, sweeping arpeggio run. It can be chromatic line. It can be like one of these typical chromatic guitar pull-ups, right? So these are all different. With metronome, there is one thing about these technical elements that there are certain phrases and certain licks that are very hard to play slow because they are based on muscle memory or on certain movements that doesn't really translate with speed. This is the tricky part of guitar technique. There are certain things and certain techniques that you don't use while playing slow and that you do when you play fast. And what I mean by that is, for example, if I say play this kind of scale run. If I play it slow, I'll possibly pick every note. If I play it a little bit faster, I can use legatos, pull-offs. If I play really fast, I'll possibly, instead of playing with my individual fingers, to shorten the way, I can use my wrist to help it a little bit. So right now, I'll play with fingers alone, right? Now I'll use a gentle movement of my wrist to help a little bit with pull-offs. So basically, what triggers the pull-offs is a joint movement of my fingers and my wrists. There's a little bit different thing when we want to build speed with open strings, and this is a very powerful tool. I really like that because you can emphasize chord tones this way. So say we're in key of A, right? So this is my this is my backing in my head, and with this A in mind, so it's A, pull off, right? These are hammer-ons and pull-offs on single notes. So it's a note, pull-off, and pick. But I can put two notes on top of that. That's something that I did a couple of minutes before. When we have This is something very Les Paul-ish. Uh, so yeah, I would possibly build up the speed just being comfortable with certain things, with certain phrases, and break everything into single techniques. Like if there are pull offs that you don't feel comfortable with, just it's about finding the way, because there is a book approach. There is like a very efficient approach for shredders and technical players that doesn't really work that well for us guys that play on clean tone or clean-ish tone, usually with loud bands, usually in the venues that you have to struggle really hard to cut through, with different kind of energy, and at the same time you need to pull a show for the people. You need to look energetic. Nobody wants to see a player focusing on their technique at that point, right? So it's about finding a way that will be comfortable for you, and it doesn't have to be correct. I mean, if you don't hurt yourself doing that, and you achieve a specific, specific sound that you're going for, that's worth it. Okay. All right. So I think I'd have to wrap it up for now. I'm so grateful for everyone watching today. It was first live stream, and I think I'd be back tomorrow. We could make more of these. I'll be happy to answer the questions always, because this is way easier for me to come up with everything, and just usually I oh, David, I'm so sorry about that. Uh, I'll promise that I'll be back tomorrow. If the same time would work, I'll be very happy to have every one of you, and and I'll be happy to answer the questions, whatever it is. If it's guitar theory, and I'll also be running in. Okay, yep, brilliant. That's the thing. I want to do some of the, maybe not hardcore theory, but like having an insight into certain things, because this tool, which is fretboard with its locations, and where the notes are, and the right techniques applied over it, is something that is so enjoyable to explore, and I think that if anyone could make a use of maybe what I could help, I'll be always happy to do so. All right. So thank you for watching and being here with me, and see you possibly tomorrow, same time. It's been really great fun. I'm really happy to have you all here, and all right. Thank you.